Hello. So we are starting the chapter, How It Works. And just a little reminder that this is not an AA meeting. We're here to learn specific facts, history, and context for the textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. We are studying the textbook. Because we have more content to cover, the time to cover it, please hold your questions to the last 10 to 15 minutes where we open up the parking lot. Okay, just a reminder of other materials we suggest you acquire for your big book study. Okay, page How It Works, 58. How it works. It is a singular word, meaning there is one, right? It's not how it works for Jane or how it works for Dave. Here, it's just how it works for all of us. We are all suffering from the same problem. All right. So rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Right. So actually, in the first manuscript, the original manuscript, it said never. But they changed it to the word rarely because they figured, we don't know what's coming. So rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. What is our path? The path is on page 72 in the second sentence, and it says, we have been trying to get a new relationship with our Creator and to discover the obstacles in our path. Remember, the steps are a process of facing and removing, right? Page 64. And we know from page 55 that deep down within every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God, but it is obscured, right? It is blocked by calamity, pomp, worship of other things. So the steps are a process of removing those blocks so that we can have an experience of the great reality within. So we are fearless in discovering these obstacles that prevent us from being tuned in and tapped in and getting the sunlight of the Spirit flowing through. That is our path. That's what we are here to do. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program, right? We know from our literature and from varieties of really religious experiences that self-surrender is indispensable. Self-surrender is indispensable. They are usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves, right? That's the introspection that is a requirement here. It's an awareness of where you're at. It's the ability to look within, to look at ourselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty, right? Our manner of living, this reminds us that this is a way of life. This is our way of life. And when it describes the way of life of the first 100 men and women, the central part of it, the main part of it, is working with other alcoholics, right? It's not meeting attendance. Meetings are mentioned twice in our big book as going to a meeting once a week for the sole purpose of connecting with the newcomer. The way of life they're talking about here is our constant thought of others, our constant work with other alcoholics. So our manner of living, which demands rigorous honesty. Honesty is mentioned 3 times here in the first paragraph. So it becomes of paramount importance that we understand what this honesty is, which is more of introspective and awareness of where you're at. Their chances are less than average. And then there are those too who suffer from grave emotional mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Great. So I just want to share briefly that how I understood this kind of honesty, right? Because this was not in my lexicon. This was not something taught in my alcoholic and drug childhood, introspection and rigorous honesty. When I first read this, I thought it was about not lying to other people, which I couldn't do. I couldn't do when I first got here. So it took me a while to understand this. And the best thing that I could say is that I remember being utterly true, thinking I was being truthful when I say, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not going to be like my mom, right? That wasn't a lie per se, like I was lying to someone. But it was a dishonest statement because I did not have the awareness that I was an alcoholic. That's what we're talking about here, is getting this deep awareness of self. Okay. So our story just, oh my God, is that showing up on the screen? Okay. All right, my phone is ringing. I'm so sorry. I got distracted. I can't turn it off. It's a VoIP phone. All right, I'm just going to ignore it. So our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. Okay, so notice that meetings are not mentioned in this chapter, but the title is How It Works. So can it work without being a meeting-centric? Check your own experience. Okay. So if you are aware of the program's course of action and still do not do it, then you are a will not, right? No willingness means no action. When a person is dishonest, it doesn't mean they're lying. They are lacking the ability to see the truth about themselves. Introspection, which is developed by practicing step 10. So when we come here, we can just assume, oh, I'm so sorry, my phone, I'm just going to turn on the do not disturb. When we first get here, we can just assume that we don't have the rigorous honesty, right? And that we're going to learn it here. Okay, so our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you've decided you want what we have, then you are willing to go to any length to get it. What it was like is the unawakened state, right? Prior to getting to recovery, unawakened, driven by self, lost in the bondage of self, making decisions in life guided by the ego mind, right? Driven by fear, driven by anger, resentment. Now, the what happened is the psychic change on page 27, right? Which we've already established what that is. But when I hear speakers talk, 1 hour speakers, the what happened is the entrance into their first AA meeting, right? Well, my psychic change and my entrance into my first AA meeting are so far apart. They are years apart. I had to be around here for years and years before the psychic change happened. So, and then what it was like now is growing along spiritual lines, right? Page 20, our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depends on our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Page 77, our real purpose is to be of maximum service to God and the people around us. How are we continuing to grow in alignment with those principles? Because we can work the steps, we can have a psychic change and a spiritual experience, but we are going to continue to work with other alcoholics, and more growth comes from that. So the story is not what it was like, what it is still like, and what it will always be like, meaning that the person did not get a new relationship with God, right? Remember the definition of new. It is something that did not exist before. Is brand new. So my old idea of God did not work, and I was dying behind that. And what I found out here is that I cannot use my alcoholic mind to define the creator of the universe, the higher power, the one who's keeping us all sober. My mind is too finite, and it's so filled with false ideas and garbage, right, that I've collected over the years, that I'm not capable of it. So what I did instead was ask God to reveal himself to me. And I just say him because that's the language in the big book. I don't necessarily think God has a gender, right? God is everything or he is nothing. So that encompasses everything. So listen for this. When you are at a speaker meeting for 1 hour, and if you hear somebody who's really speaking like this, that's someone you want to make a connection with, right? That's somebody that you want to have a cup of coffee with, cup of coffee. You want to stay in touch with that person. If they're really talking about how they established a new relationship with God and what their psychic change is like, that's someone you want to stay in touch with, not the person who comes up there and does the drunk-a-log for 50 minutes, talks about entrance into an AA meeting, may or may not talk about God, but really they haven't made a new relationship with God. That to me is not judgment, but that's how I practice discernment. Discernment, okay? So each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he establishes relationship with God. Okay? So this is the purpose of the stories. This is why you get the floor for an hour. So how are you going to do that when doing your speaker meeting? All right. And then it says here, if you decided you want what we have, all right, the we is the first 100 men and women. We already established that. What the hell did they have? Well, what they had is on page 25 in the second paragraph. I'm just going to grab my book here. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we, the first 100 men and women, have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact, right? What's a fact? Of our lives today is that the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous, right? So right now you're going through the investigation. The investigation is going to end here pretty quickly. And now they're asking you, do you want what we have? Right? Well, at some of these, we balked. Balking means to hesitate or be unwilling to an accept idea or undertaking. Have you seen people balking, right? We thought we could find an easier, softer way. Oh, I guess I'm supposed to stop and read page 155 real quick. Just a moment. Almost there. Okay. His call to the clergyman led him presently to a certain resident of the town who, though formerly able and respected, was then nearing the nadir of alcoholic despair. It was the unusual situation: home in jeopardy, wife ill, children distracted, bill in arrears, and standing damaged. He had a desperate desire to stop, but saw no way out. For he had earnestly tried many avenues of escape. Painfully aware of being somehow abnormal, the man did not fully realize what it meant to be alcoholic, right? He wasn't convinced, didn't take step one. When our friend related his experience, the man agreed that no amount of willpower he might muster could stop him from drinking for long. A spiritual experience, he conceded, was absolutely necessary, but the price seemed too high upon the basis suggested. He told how he lived in constant worry about those who might find out about his alcoholism. He had, of course, the familiar alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking. Why, he argued, should he lose the remainder of his business only to bring still more suffering to his family by foolishly admitting his plight to people from whom he made his livelihood? He would do anything, he said, but that. He balked. Being intrigued, however, he invited our friend to his home. Sometime later, and just as he thought he was getting control of his liquor situation, he went on a roaring bender. For him, this was the spree that ended all sprees. He saw that he would have to face his problems squarely, that God might give him mastery. Okay, so we know what that is about. This is the balking. We can balk, but we're still going to go down that doom curve and then end up with the willingness, right? So we thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, but the result was nil until we let go absolutely. All right, so let's talk about some of those old ideas. Page 55, the fourth paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself. Then, if you wish, you could join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. Page 12, the fifth paragraph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thus, I was convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. So, letting go of our old ideas, I think that is something that I see constantly stopping people from recovery. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Well, really, I mean, my question is a cup of alcohol really that powerful or baffling, or is the obsession with it more powerful? The mind tells us to drink or not drink. Okay, just something to say. Without help, it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. The question is, when is now? It's 6 months from now. It's 6. I'm procrastinating. No, now is now. So half measures availed us nothing. So what is a half measure? I've got an example here of an Alano club. So you can, if you want to call the Alano club, you put in 562 337 96. And now, is that phone call gonna go through? No, because I didn't put in all the numbers. It's a half measure. You have to dial all of the numbers to get a phone call, right? If you don't put in all the numbers, you get no results. That's what they mean here. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. Page 53, second paragraph, talks about the turning point. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? This is the turning point that they're talking about here. And then we get a prayer. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. All right. I am going to stop there and open up the parking lot.
Okay, I really just have two questions. What protection and care with complete abandon. What page is that prayer on?
Oh, sure. 59.
Okay, 59. Okay. And then the other question is without help, it is too much for us. And so the question I think that I have the answer to, but I just want to be clear. Without help, it's too much, meaning that help that we need help from God, right? Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
okay?
Yes.
Without help, it is too much. And then the other question I had in the story about the guy who he didn't want to this story that you told he didn't want to face his problem squarely. He balked. He hesitated. He ended up no, the question is he ended up facing his problem squarely. Is that correct?
Yes, it's referring to Bill and Dr. Bob's first visit.
Okay, okay. And then I guess it's kind of a silly question. I think I might know the answer, but what I wrote down is how did he do that? And I think the answer is no half measures. If you want what we had, um page 25, paragraph number 2, right? That's how he did that when he faced his problems squarely.
That's right.
Okay,
So that's we read to the bottom of page 155, but when you go to 156, um, you see that he immediately went out and started getting honest with people and making amends and doing everything.
right. So the basically with like 4 through 12,
Right.
because he admitted, he was dying of this disease and was honest with himself. And then the willingness was to then do the action step. So unwilling is to not be doing anything. That's an unwillingness. So then he began to be honest first with himself and then honest with others. And then the willingness came in through the action, which was not 1, 2, and 3. Is that correct? But then 4 through 12.
You're
Is that
you're exactly right. Remember, willingness equals action. So the action steps start at 4. You're right.
the action steps start at 4? And then, so my last question is what we've done so far here with the study. I feel as though I have done in terms of honesty, I am very, very clear that I am what the big book describes as a real alcoholic. Um, Step 2, that there is nothing that I'm beyond human aid. For me, that's step 2. I am beyond human aid. Um, Step 3, because I know there's a prayer with step 3, I don't say that prayer on a daily basis. Would that fall under the category of action? Saying that third step prayer?
Oh, so the third step prayer is a decision. It's a decision to go through with the action steps.
Okay, okay. I think I
I'm not
missed,
sure that you have to do that daily.
right.
Doesn't make sense. So what we'll see, which will be coming up in the next one, is that once we are convinced and we make a decision in step 3, that we immediately launch into action.
Okay. So the third step prayer isn't necessarily an action step. It's a decision. Is that
Yes,
correct? Okay.
that's right.
Is a decision. Okay. Yeah. Um, okay. I'm clear. Those were my questions.
Okay, perfect.